Hi everyone, how you all doing? Here I am at St James's Park for the first one of the season, and here we are, not even out of June, but I thought I'd come on, speak to you guys, give you a little update, just have a general chat about what's been going on or what's not been going on, because I would imagine a few of you getting a little bit frustrated, worried, concerned that Newcastle have yet to sign anyone this transfer window. Now, before I get into the video, firstly, thank you for everyone following. I really appreciate that. Please leave a comment below, and please do subscribe if you haven't done already. Towards the end of the season, managed to get the subscribers up by a couple of thousand, and keen to try and keep progressing that. And if I do that, I'll be able to keep the channel going into next season with all the European games, pre-season, all that sort of thing as well. So yeah, keen to get more subscribers, so please do that if you can. That's my please out the way. Leave your comments, all that kind of stuff, and keen to hear what you guys have got to think. I'd imagine you've got a lot of views on the lack of action in the transfer window so far, which of course, you know, when you look at other clubs, I would say is a little bit of a concern when you see the likes of Chelsea, Man City, Liverpool, Arsenal all adding 2, 3, 4 players already, and Newcastle obviously still stood there waiting on the first arrival. So let's talk about the most in fact, before I get into that, apologies for my hair today. It's an absolute, I've not actually been in the shower since the gym this morning. I've been working from home. I'm in gym clothes. Don't need to see that, but yeah, it's very hot today, isn't it? Very hot, very humid. But yeah, it's very rare I'm stood here at St James's Park in shorts and t-shirts. I do remember actually the day the takeover collapsed back in 2020, I think it was, July 2020. I remember being stood here, shorts and t-shirts, similar sort of weather. My parents were down visiting from Edinburgh, and stood here, and I've got a picture of myself in shorts and t-shirts, and it's very, very rare. So look, I know it's not amazing times at the moment, but look, it could be worse. We could be back there, the takeover falling through, and you guys, you know, trying to get Hamza Chowdhury on loan. But at least, look, you're in with a fight of signing these players, but so far it's proving pretty difficult. So let's start with the most recent one. Of course, last night we heard that João Pedro had opted for Chelsea rather than Newcastle. Brighton agreeing a £55 million deal with Chelsea for the player to go there. First thing I'm going to say is my opinion is it's a lot of money for João Pedro. I know they signed him for 35, I think it was, a couple of seasons ago. 55 million's a lot of money. I can understand why Newcastle didn't go that far. I think also there's been noises from the players' side that Chelsea were his number one choice anyway, which I found a little bit surprising that Newcastle stayed at the table for as long as they did. Now, my information is that Newcastle walked away on Saturday. Later on Saturday, we were given a bit of a steer on Saturday morning that they were still at the table, and then something happened over the next couple of hours. They probably learned that an agreement was close with Chelsea, or that the player had intimated he wanted to go to Chelsea, and Newcastle walked away later on Saturday afternoon into Saturday evening. And then of course it was wrapped up pretty quickly, and I think he's already on his way over to the US from Brazil to sign. So look, would João Pedro be in Newcastle's starting 11 on the opening day of the season against Aston Villa on August the 16th? I don't think so. I really don't. I don't think he's a right winger. He's not a left winger. He's either a number 9 or a number 10. Now, as we know, Newcastle don't play a number 10. They play 4-3-3 if they can. Eddie Howe's favoured formation, and he's not going to get a game ahead of Isak, is he? So for me, it was a lot of money to spend on someone who was essentially going to be the backup striker, the foil for Alexander Isak. And look, I think the same can be said for James Trafford as well. Look, as much as he's a good goalkeeper, he's had a terrific season in the Championship, and you know, we're talking half the amount of money that was being quoted for Pedro. But for Trafford, he's not going to walk in and be number one choice. I think it'll still be Nick Pope until Pope either gets an injury or Pope does something wrong. I think he still will be number one choice, and rightly so, because he had a terrific second half of the last season after recovering from that nasty shoulder injury. So look, neither Trafford nor Pedro would, in my mind, go into Newcastle's starting 11 for the opening game of the season. So it's a lot of money to spend on guys who are bulking up the squad. However, I think with the other player Anthony Elanga that they've made a bid for and had it rejected. I think I could see him coming into the starting 11 because, you know, I think he is an upgrade on Jacob Murphy as well as Jacob Murphy's done, and I think Murphy will absolutely push him all the way. But I think Elanga is the long-term replacement for Jacob Murphy in that position, and we'll get on to Elanga in a moment. But just hovering on Pedro a little bit longer. Look, you don't want to sign players who don't want to play for you, and look, that's been a couple of opportunities now where Pedro could have came and it's not happened. Yes, it was more Newcastle who walked away the first time, but the last thing you want a player is coming up here and feeling forced to join. The noises I was hearing for a number of weeks were that he was kind of hoping Chelsea would come to the table. I think Brighton were probably wanting a bidding war between Newcastle and Brighton, and that was why between Newcastle and Chelsea, should I say, and that's why the Chelsea interest was kind of kept on the back burner for so long. But yeah, it just didn't add up for me, the amount of money that was being quoted for a player like that. And I think the 45 plus 5, the £50 million transfer that Newcastle offered for Pedro to Brighton, I thought was more than fair, more than enough. I agree that Newcastle shouldn't have gone above that. And of course, remember, it's for a player who was kind of intimating behind the scenes they want to go to Chelsea anyway. So do you really want to break the bank for that? Now, I got a lot of stick on social media over the weekend, particularly on Saturday, because I'd said that Newcastle have got a budget of around £125 million. Now, of course, I'm talking about pre-sales. So if you were to sell a Sean Longstaff, or I don't know, I mean, like a Joe Willock, or even an Anthony Gordon, who you would have to say had a pretty poor end to the season, and of all Newcastle's top players, I would say he's the one that there's a little bit of a question mark over. I would suggest, you know, there's been that long-standing interest from Liverpool, but I think, you know, I think if there's any big name player who could go from Newcastle, he would be the one that's most likely. I would still imagine he will be here come the first day of the season, but when you look at Isak, Bruno, Tonali, himself, he's probably the most likely of that four, but I still don't think he'll go. But Newcastle could, of course, sell someone like that. Then that opens the door to give them more than 125 million to spend. So look, I know there's been reports out there saying Newcastle have got 200 million. That's not my information. I believe it's less than that, as I say, but of course that can be supplemented by player sales. It can be supplemented by bringing forward a transfer, bringing forward some of the budget from January, like we saw before when they signed Anthony Gordon, like we saw before when they signed Lewis Hall on a loan until the end of the season. They can be creative and do things like that. So if it is, say, 125 million and you were to spend 55 on João Pedro, you know, that's eating into a fair chunk, almost half of your budget, and leaving you still trying to buy a right winger, a centre back and a goalkeeper. So I can see why Newcastle, you know, I feel they were breaking the bank to offer 50. If they then offered another 55, say, for Elanga, that's 105, and then that would leave them the 25 to go and get Trafford. I know that leaves it difficult to get a defender, but as I say, you can bring forward some of the money from January, or you could maybe sell a Longstaff or a Willock or whoever, maybe even a Gordon, someone like that, and that would then open the door to then go and allow yourself to spend a little bit more. So look, they're operating in a difficult world. It has been difficult over the last 3 transfer windows. Of course, you've failed to add, and I can see why there's frustration, because you guys want to just go and splash money. I mean, I was playing golf yesterday, and the lad I was playing golf with said, why don't you just give Brighton what they want? Why don't you just give Forest? Just give them if that's what they want. It doesn't work like that. It's business. It's, you know, money's tight. PSR's a problem. You need deals to be good. Like, I mean, that's essentially what Juventus did to Newcastle for Lloyd Kelly, and you know, most fans were laughing at that, saying, "Oh, Newcastle done a brilliant bit of business there." Do you really want to do the same thing to these clubs, to Brighton or Nottingham Forest or Bournemouth? Do you really want to be doing that? So I think Newcastle are going about it the right way. It's just frustrating it's got to this stage. Look, I think what's making things a bit difficult for Newcastle as well is, of course, they don't have a sporting director at the moment. Paul Mitchell's moved on. You know, Eddie Howe and Andy Howe are having to do a lot of the work themselves, helped by Steve Nixon, and it's a lot. It is a lot. I mean, we saw Eddie towards the end of the season with his illness and whatnot. It can be stressful. It can be a lot on your shoulders, and to not have that buffer there, to not have someone there to be doing the negotiations for you, so you can concentrate on the team, is difficult. And I do think that's hindered Newcastle to an extent. And you have to say, why has it got to this stage where they're going into this transfer window without a sporting director? I mean, just look down the road at Sunderland, they've got 2. It is it is bad decision making. It's got to the stage that they don't have a sporting director. But I have to say, those people on the ground are working around the clock to try and get deals done. And look, there is still plenty of time. We're still in June. It's the 30th of June. Tomorrow's the 1st of July. You've still got 2 full months to try and get players in the door. And look, I think for a lot of people, myself included, it feels like we're well into the transfer window because it opened early for the little mini window for the Club World Cup. It opened early for that, and I think because of that, it feels as though we're well into it. But in a normal transfer window, we're literally only 2 weeks into it. We'd normally open in the middle of June, and here we are at the end of June. So it's easy for me to say, but try not to get too worried. What I will say is the money is still there to spend. It's not like the money's disappeared, the money's gone. It's not like last summer where you didn't have the money, where you were trying to flog players to be able to try and potentially buy. You're not in that situation at all. The money is there. Whether it's 125 or 150 with a sale or 200 by bringing forward money from January, I don't know, but the positive is the money's still there to spend, and you need to just try and remember that. And look, I'm not trying to preach, but you're in a much better position now than you have been over the last 3 transfer windows. So I still think players will arrive. I do wonder whether maybe there is something in the background there that perhaps, these players are maybe being used as a smokescreen. We've seen it before with Sandro Tonali and Alexander Isak, and perhaps there's something at play there. If that's the case, I don't know who that is, but all the noises is that Elanga is the number 1 choice. Of course, that was Brian Mbeumo, but it's now obviously been moved to Elanga, and I can see Elanga being perfect for Eddie Howe's style. I would imagine, I feel like that deal will get done. Newcastle aren't in competition with anyone. They know that they're close in terms of the fee. I think the player would be happy to move here from what I'm being told. And it's a case of Newcastle coming up with the numbers. So that offer last week that they had rejected was, there's a single magpie, better salute it. I think that offer was 145, sorry, I wish it was 145. I'm putting a 1 in front of everything. 45 for Elanga last week. Obviously Forest wants 60. I feel if Newcastle were to kind of split the difference there and maybe get 52, 53, something like that, probably the money that we see Pedro go to Chelsea for, I think Newcastle will get the deal done, and I would hope there'll be some movement over that one in the next few days. And look, I could see Elanga in his style, his pace, his work rate, his ability to score goals and assist. He had great numbers last season in a team who only had like 30% possession. Newcastle perhaps won't have a huge lot of possession in some top level Champions League games this season, so someone like him with that pace on the attack will really help Newcastle, and I can see him fitting in perfect. I think he's got a lot of the Anthony Gordons about him, but plays on the other side. Also, he's a close ally of Alexander Isak, both play for Sweden together, compatriot, and look, you'd like to think that maybe Elanga's potential arrival will help just settle any issues that Isak might have, or any glances he's getting from other clubs. Look, Isak's settled here. I do think he'll stay this transfer window. I think you'll get another year at least out of him. I can't see anyone paying the 140, 150 million that it would take to prize him away from Newcastle, so I think he will stay. Of course, Newcastle in a strong position with the contract. They're hoping to open contract extension with him this summer, which obviously would put to bed any lingering speculation that's there. I just can't see anyone affording him. I really can't at that price. Liverpool perhaps, but they've signed Wirtz, haven't they, from Leverkusen for a similar amount of money. I just can't see them spending that amount twice. So look, I think Isak stays, and I think the potential arrival of Elanga will really help him to have his close mate, his compatriot, and I just see Elanga really fitting in well. I know I've seen a lot of comments on social media from fans that they wouldn't be impressed with the arrival of him, and they didn't feel, a few of the other names I put out last week that Newcastle would look at alternatively, the likes of Adeyemi or Bakayoko or Kudus. It felt like a lot of fans would have favoured a couple of those rather than Isak. Leave your thoughts below, but for me, Elanga, his numbers last season, he was taking on defences single-handedly. His ability to score and create chances and really trouble teams on the break would be perfect for this Newcastle United side. I mean, if you had the front three of Elanga, Isak and Gordon, absolutely rapid, the three of them, they would scare any defence in the world, really. So look, I think the Elanga thing should move soon. I expect Newcastle to go back in with an improved bid if they haven't already. Obviously Pedro's gone, you need to let that go. If he doesn't want to play for you, he doesn't want to play for you. He's obviously getting paid significantly more than Newcastle can afford. Similar situation with Mbeumo. If he doesn't want to sign, then that's it. Sorry, I had to stop that there because there was a helicopter flying above. Not a new signing, I don't think, but feel free to check it on the Flight Radar app, any of you who have got plenty of time on your hands. The Dean Howson one at Bournemouth was one I think Newcastle thought they had a real chance of. He was very impressed by the project here in Newcastle, and I think Newcastle really thought they had a chance of getting him. But look, when Real Madrid come to the table, it's difficult. I can see an acceptance from you guys as Newcastle fans why he's gone there, but I can see a frustration that, you know, you've now lost Delap and you've lost Pedro to Chelsea. And it's like, how many times are Chelsea going to do this? Are these guys going to start? They've already got Nicholas Jackson there. Is Pedro going to stay? Is Pedro going to get into the team ahead of Cole Palmer? I don't think so. I mean, Delap, you'd like to think will start as their number 9, but it's just a frustration that Chelsea, with their wages and the fact they're based in London. Look, I know a lot of people would disagree with this and were hitting out yesterday when I said this on social media, but it's, look, players, most of them, a lot of them prefer playing for a London side. Look, you don't get, not everyone's a Bruno Guimaraes or a Sandro Tonali who are cool about wherever they play. There's some players out there who just want to be in London, their partners, wives want to be in London, families want to be in London, and they want the trappings of everything that comes with that. It's sad, it's always existed, it's still there. Anyway, Pedro gone. The last deal that's on the cards at the moment, active, is James Trafford, who we reported over the weekend Newcastle are of course still in talks with. From what I've heard today, there's still a bit of a gap. That was the same I said on Saturday. I still think that's the case, and I don't think it's that close. Look, I know there's a couple of reports out there, people saying that it is close. That's not my information. I might be wrong. From what I'm hearing is there's still a gap between what Newcastle are offering and what Burnley are asking for. And look, for me, is it Newcastle's priority at the moment? No, the priority is to bring in a right winger and a central defender. So look, for me, I don't think it'd be the worst thing to park that for now until you get a right winger or a centre back in. Look, you've got Nick Pope there. Yes, it'd be great to get Trafford in the door, but look, if the numbers get ridiculous, you have to walk away. In Newcastle's situation, you have to walk away. You can't be held to ransom. Again, clubs thinking that Newcastle have got more money to spend than what they have. It's been a situation we've seen for a couple of years now. It's still existing, and it's getting really difficult for the club, and that's why we're stood here in this position. You know, no signings in the door. Yes, there's a long way to go, but no signings in the door. And you see Liverpool signing, you know, Wirtz, Kerkez, Frimpong, Chelsea signing Delap, Pedro, Gittins, Man City signing Ait Nouri, Cherki, Reinders. It's incredible. These clubs have obviously got a lot more headroom to spend. One, due to the fact that they're selling players, they're trading, which Newcastle aren't really doing too much, aside from Almiron and Kelly in January, and of course the ones they had till last summer, Anderson and Minty. And then of course take into the account that these clubs' commercial revenue is significantly higher than Newcastle's. You know, Man City is still probably dwarfing Newcastle's almost 3 or 4 times as much. So that is what Newcastle are fighting up against. Look, I know I've come on here, doesn't sound positive. Things can change quickly. You can get one in the door, suddenly it's a domino effect and you can get a couple more. I would just stay patient, trust the process. The money is still there to spend, and you will get players in. Yes, they might not be Eddie Howe's absolute first choice, but he will not sign players that he doesn't want. So that's an update for me. I know there's probably not too much fresh information there, guys, but that's where they are. If there's anything further on Elanga, Trafford or anyone else, I'll bring you these details here, and also of course on Sky Sports News as well. So just letting that helicopter go over. Yeah, it's good to be back. I had 4 weeks off. It was nice to have a little break. But yeah, here we are back, and the transfer window as well and truly in swing. Let's hope we get a breakthrough soon and you guys can have some positive news to reflect on. Okay guys, leave your comments below. Nice to speak to you all. Take care. Bye bye.